Hi folks, how you doing? It's James, JT at the movies, and we're back here again for our 8th episode of Debriefing 007, and we're going to talk today about Roger Moore's first appearance as James Bond 007 in the 1973 film Live and Let Die. So Roger Moore stepped into the role as James Bond. Now, I like Roger Moore, to be fair. He's not my favourite Bond. He's actually tied for third place with Sean Connery, both for different reasons, mind you. But I do really enjoy Roger Moore's Bond films. When they were in the pre-production of this film, it became really clear that no amount of money was going to convince Sean Connery to come back again, although he obviously later did for Never Say Never Again, but he was done with the official series. He wasn't coming back, and the producers were really wary of casting another unknown after having a poor experience, shall we say, with George Lazenby. And They were also really wary that audiences might not warm to a new Bond, as there would have been a new Bond in, the last three films sort of thing. We'd have had Lazenby, then Connery's come back, and then now a new Bond. So they were really sort of nervous that audiences might think that Bond's time was over. To make sure that they had the best possible chance, they decided to go from a pool of well-known British actors and narrowed it down to Sir Roger Moore. Apparently, they even considered Timothy Dalton for this film, but he was flattered but felt too young and didn't want to follow on from Sean Connery. I actually thought that was on Her Majesty's Secret Service that they'd offered that to him, but I was just doing a bit of brushing up and reading up on this film afterwards, and apparently it was for this one. If I'm wrong, let me know down below if anybody knows the right fact on that. But anyway, they chose Roger Moore, who was known to the British public for playing the lead role as Simon Templar in The Saint, and also alongside Tony Curtis in The Persuaders, and he was a well-respected and loved TV star, so at least they had a familiar face with it. Tom Mankiewicz, who wrote Diamonds Are Forever, was retained to direct this, as was Guy Hamilton, the director for the previous entry, and also of Goldfinger as well, to make sure that they maintained that overall Bond flavour, as it were. Mankiewicz, when writing the script, sort of leaned into Roger Moore's persona more, and as we know with the Roger Moore films, there's a lot more humour, and there's a lot more sort of charm about the character than perhaps Connery and Lazenby had brought to it, and subsequent iterations have brought to it. Roger Moore really sort of tries to lean into at least the whole sort of dapper gentleman bit, doesn't he? And the script was sort of written to reflect that. There were starts of signs of humour in Diamonds Are Forever, and a few wise cracks on Connery's parts, and a few gags and things like that, weren't there really? And whilst they didn't really work for Sean Connery in that particular film, who'd always played a really hard-edged Bond really well, it's just right up Roger Moore's street, and I think most folk would agree that is one of his strong suits. And when you think of a quip, a Bond quip, or at least my mind, you go to Roger Moore. Anyway, so the plot of this film is that Bond's sent to investigate the death of some MI6 colleagues, and his search takes him out to New York, it takes him to New Orleans, and also to the Caribbean island of San Monique, which I believe is a fictional island. And in this particular story, the island is run by their Prime Minister, who is Dr. Kananga, who's actually this film's leading villain as well. But Bond teams up with Felix, and they learn that Dr. Kananga is actually in business and in cahoots with a known Harlem drug dealer called Mr. Big. So it's whilst investigating all of that Bond runs into some of Mr. Big's goons and ends up being captured and taken back to Mr. Big's lair. It's there that he's interrogated, and ultimately Mr. Big says, now take him out, and I think waste him is the phrase that he used. In that interaction, Bond's introduced to the film's leading lady, which is Solitaire. Now, Solitaire is I would say that she is Kananga's mistress, and I'll drop the reveal here because it's nearly a 50-year-old film, but Mr. Big and Kananga are one in the same bloke. But she's his mistress. Now, they don't have a physical romantic relationship, because for Solitaire to be able to use her psychic abilities and read the future in tarot cards, which is what she does, she sort of provides a narration almost for, I'd say, the first third of the film. She needs to keep her virginity intact. I couldn't think of a more delicate way of saying that, really. So and sort of Kananga promises that when the time comes they will be lovers. Bond's introduced from her, and they have a bit of a back and forth that sort of sets up their relationship as they go down the film. Bond manages to escape the goons, and then flies out to San Monique. It's there that he meets up with a fellow agent, Rosie Carver, who actually turns out to be a double agent working for Kananga. Bond realises while he's in San Monique that Kananga is growing poppies for opium, and is basically growing drugs. And Bond hasn't put two and two together yet that Kananga and Mr. Big are one and the same bloke, and believes that the pair of them are working together. It's at this point that he has more of an interaction with Solitaire, and in a really cringy scene that's not aged well, where Bond sort of stacks the deck of cards in his favour, as he puts it in the film, manages to seduce Solitaire, and the pair of them end up sleeping together. That means that she loses her sight to see into the future and to be able to aptly read the tarot cards. Now, the pair of them escape to New Orleans, where Bond is again recaptured, and Mr. Big comes back onto the scene, wanting to know whether or not Bond and Solitaire had been together. Bond refuses to give any information up, forcing Mr. Big to reveal to Bond that he is in fact Kananga. Kananga then gives Solitaire a test and asks a true or false question about James Bond's watch, which is later revealed that she got wrong. Bond's then taken out to an alligator farm by one of the goons. I think it's Teehee that takes him out there, Mr. Teehee. And the idea is that Bond's going to be fed to the alligators. Of course, in only a way that James Bond can, he escapes and then leads the henchmen of the film on a merry song and dance up the rivers through New Orleans, which is where we are introduced to one of the worst characters of the James Bond franchise, Sergeant J.W. Pepper. Sheriff J.W. Pepper, sorry. And this guy is a real sort of caricature, real, like I say, stereotype sort of character brought to life, and he's just so out of place in a James Bond film. A bit of comic relief maybe to have had him in a couple of scenes, but he really overstays his welcome. And the fact that they thought it was a sensible idea to bring him back for Man with the Golden Gun, well, I have absolutely no idea what they were thinking with that. But anyway, we'll get to that next time. So the bad guys are chasing Bond as he's, sort of speeding down the river in a speedboat. They're chasing him. JW and his police force are chasing them on the roads, and it all culminates in a big crash where it's revealed that Bond's one of the good guys. And then thankfully that's the last we see of JW Pepper after that. Bond then goes back to San Monique to rescue Solitaire, who's been kidnapped in all of this commotion going on, and she's now back with Dr. Kananga. Baron Samedi, who's again another one of the henchmen, and sort of manages to protect the poppy fields out in San Monique by sort of convincing the locals that there's a whole sort of voodoo and sort of mystic charm going on, and that it's in their best interests to stay away, sort of thing. Has a bit of a ritual where he's trying to get a snake to bite Solitaire, and ends up battling with Bond. Bond and Solitaire then manage to flee that scene and break into Kananga's lair. It's there that Kananga does the whole villain monologuing bit and talking about how he's going to supply these drugs for free to American cities, get them hooked on his product, and then drive his competitors out of business, and then basically sort of have a monopoly on the drugs market from there. Bond and Solitaire are about to be fed to some sharks, and Bond, using a magnetic watch that he's given by M earlier in the film, manages to escape from that situation. Bond and Kananga have a battle, and it's at which point that Bond puts a compressed air capsule in his mouth, sets it off like a grenade, and it blows Kananga up like a balloon, and explodes it all over the lair in a really, really dated bit of effect work. I'm sure it looked absolutely fantastic at the time, but when you watch these things in 1080p on a massive screen like I've got behind behind me. It's quite funny. I do love this film. I really, really like Roger Moore's tenure as James Bond. The film ends with Bond and Solitaire going on a train ride. I can't quite remember where they're going, but I think they're going to meet up with Felix. Yeah, they're going to meet up with Felix Leiter down the line in another major city, basically to sort of debrief on the whole thing. On the train, there is a struggle with Mr. Teehee, who's survived everything, and Bond ends up locking his mechanical arm in a joint in the window, which sort of renders him sort of disabled, and he's able to then kick him out of the window, and that's the last we see of him. Bond and Solitaire then settle down for a night in together on the train, and the credits roll as we see Baron Samedi's also survived his encounter with James Bond and sits on the front of the train laughing. I always loved that ending, where he sat on the front of the train and he starts laughing, and then Paul McCartney's song comes up, and it's great. So I absolutely love this film. I think it's really well made. I think there's a few missteps in it, don't get me wrong. Like I say, the character of J.W. Pepper should have been for a comic relief scene just the once, if at all. You know, like they had the sheriff in the Las Vegas Strip in Diamonds Are Forever, and he gets a bit of a quip. They chase after Bond, and then Bond outsmarts them. If they were going to do something like that, then they should have kept it to that level. There's the guy in View to a Kill as well, who's sort of like the... He's not Danny DeVito, but he's got that sort of Danny DeVito-esque sort of thing going on. And that car's coming out of your paycheck. And, you know, they should have kept it to that level of performance, but they really do overdo it as well. And one thing that I know has been commented on before is that the 70s Bond films, the Roger Moore ones, generally tend to take a lot of inspiration from other popular film genres and topics at the time. Obviously, this film has quite a large African American cast, and a lot of it's set in New York and Harlem, and it does draw inspiration from a lot of that sort of like blaxploitation films of the early 70s as well. Much like Man with the Golden Gun draws on like the Asian and martial arts cinema films. Moonraker with Star Wars, Octopussy does the same thing with sort of like evoking Romancing the Stone and Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, in its senses as well. It's one thing that the Roger Moore Bond films tend to do. They tend to date themselves and sort of make mention of whatever else is going on in cinema or maybe in pop culture as well at the time. I like that this film's a little bit more laid back. Like I say, it plays into Roger Moore's Bond quite well. You can see in this one and in Golden Gun, which again I won't say too much about because we're going to talk about it next time. But in this one, he's still trying to find his feet. There are hints of him maybe trying to do some of the Connery-esque things that don't quite work, and that there's probably more of that in Golden Gun than there is with this one. But you can tell that they've upped the humour and the quips and things like that for Roger Moore, because he's more of a, you know, he had more sort of comedic timing, as it were. Yaphet Kotto plays Mr. Big, Dr. Kananga, the film's big bad. He's another one of my favourite actors. I always like when he shows up in things. He's in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and he's the saving grace of that. And he's in Alien, isn't he? And he pops up in a few films of the 70s and 80s, and I always enjoy watching any performance that he does. And he's great in this. He's a really, really good villain. He's not your average sort of Bond villain in the sense of, obviously, this guy, you know, he's the leader of a country, and you know it brings a different vibe to it, and I quite like the whole Mr. Big is Dr. Kananga and vice versa sort of thing. Think he's great. You've got Julius Harris playing Mr. Teehee and Jeffrey Holder playing Baron Samedi, and they sort of round out your trio of villains as well. There's a villain called Whisper as well, who's a little bit of comic relief, and then there's Gloria Hendry plays the sort of the double agent second lady, Rosie Carver, and then we've got the fantastic Jane Seymour as the leading lady for the film. She's just absolutely brilliant. I think she was only 19 when she did this film. She really plays well the sort of the version of somebody that sort of really led a sort of really sheltered life and sort of has a really innocent outlook on things. sort of coupled well with that, she knows that when she's reading the cards and she's predicting death, that somebody's going to go out there and get killed, and she manages to play the two things together really, really well. And she plays really well off Roger Moore. The two of them seem to have a really great chemistry. And then obviously you've got the MI6 regulars as well in there. You've got Bernard Lee as M, and you've got Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny, and the three of them, Bond, Moneypenny, and M, have a comedic scene where Bond's trying to get an Italian agent out of his flat who shouldn't be there at the start of the film. Desmond Llewellyn's not in this one as Q. There was a scheduling conflict, and they filmed, or rather they wrote a scene for him, and then gave him a schedule, and then had to change something up, and he couldn't get out of another film that he was in, so Moneypenny takes over the very brief Q briefing for this film. But he's back the next time round, which is great, because he's my favourite Bond ally. David Hedison's in this as Felix Leiter. He's my favourite Felix. Absolutely love this guy as Felix Leiter. I think he's brilliant, and a real shame that he didn't get to do more as well. I've said this about most of the Felixes, haven't I? To be fair, but no, Hedison is my favourite one. Well, I think you might have guessed, guys, that I really like this film. It's Roger Moore's tenure in general is something that I really enjoy. They're the ones I come back to the most. Now, he's not my favourite Bond, as I mentioned, but they're so easy to watch that if ever I just want to watch a popcorn fun Bond film on a rainy Sunday afternoon or whatever, it's generally one of Roger Moore's that goes on, and I just think that they're really accessible and really great films. They do dip in quality, and I'm going to be really sort of try and be objective as well as subjective when I do these reviews going forward, so you haven't to worry about that. I'm not going to turn around and give a view to a killer glowing review by any stretch of an imagination, but there we go. I'm going to rate Live and Let Die a 7.5 out of 10. So there you have it, folks. That's my thoughts, my ramblings, my rants on Live and Let Die, Roger Moore's first appearance as James Bond. I do enjoy watching this film, and I do hope that you've enjoyed my review as well. If you did enjoy the review, and you enjoy videos talking about the James Bond movies, collecting physical media, reviewing films, doing DVD and Blu-ray unboxings, just talking about film in general as an art form, and just enjoying the medium that is movies, then please think about subscribing to my channel, because that's what I'm all about. And as we move into 2021, that's what I'm going to be bringing you guys for content. If you do subscribe, please ring that notification bell, and that way you're the first person to be notified when I do post a video. You can watch it straight away and leave me your thoughts. If you've liked this video, leave us a thumbs up down below, and do leave me a comment as well. What did you think of Live and Let Die? What do you think of Roger Moore as James Bond? Do you prefer him to Connery? Do you prefer Connery? Do you prefer one of the other chaps? Let's have a discussion about it. I absolutely adore the James Bond series, and could talk until I'm blue in the face about it, as you've probably guessed from this video. Above all else, folks, please continue to stay safe and take care of yourselves. I wish you all a very happy and healthy new year, and all the very best for 2021. I will see you in our next episode of Debriefing 007, where we talk about 1974's The Man with the Golden Gun. Cheers for now.